Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to take up Dr. Heidegger's experiment, composed by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born at Salem in Massachusetts, America, on 4th July 1814. He was a very famous literary giant in American literature. His fame as a writer moved from generation to generation. Hawthorne started writing stories at a very early age and published them, but he could then gather no fame for himself. He could become famous in the literary world rather late in life when his great novel, The Scarlet Letter, was published in 1850. The very surprising thing about Hawthorne was that he devoted his whole life to writing, but he produced comparatively little. He was a contemporary of some great Americans like Thoreau and Emerson and shared with them some ideals of the times, while in several other aspects he was markedly different from them. The greater part of Nathaniel Hawthorne's boyhood was passed at Salem, and it was only after the death of his father, when he was 14 years old, in 1818, that he went to live in the town of Raymond along with his mother. He wrote over 100 short stories, which were published in three collections: Twice Told Tales, Moses of an Old Man's, and Show Image. His most famous, his most famous novel is The Scarlet Letter, which gave him immense fame. The present story, Dr. Heidegger's experiment, tries to expose one of the major weaknesses of human beings. This weakness is that man hopes against hope. He hopes for the difficult and the impossible. Nature presents situations to encourage man's hopes, but everyone knows that such hopes simply belie. Dr. Heidegger's experiment is a representative short story in which Hawthorne tries to show the weak traits in man which are incorrigible. There are four old persons, three men, and a widow, whom Dr. Heidegger invites to be his guests. He requests them to help him or assist him in performing his experiment. Dr. Heidegger had a wondrous liquid, rather a magic drug, the draughts of which make those old persons young and rejuvenated, but they start behaving irresponsibly like wanton young persons, like hooligans. They dream to keep themselves young forever, so they decide to go to Florida in search of the fountain of youth. Hawthorne's story, Dr. Heidegger's experiment, is based on the study of human nature. It exposes that human nature is full of weaknesses and many of them are incorrigible. Every old person wants to show himself as young. Sex is an instinct which haunts every man. The story exposes this weakness of human nature, and this weakness, the writer finds, is incorrigible, that cannot be corrected at any cost. The experiment made by Dr. Heidegger, as given, testifies the statement. Dr. Heidegger was a strange man. He had some eccentricities which he wanted to satisfy. He had wonderful liquid, the effect of which he wanted to observe. He needed some persons for this purpose to be experimented. Since the experiment was related to youth of persons, he wanted both male and female old persons to be involved in this experiment. He invited four of his friends, of whom one was a lady. Dr. Heidegger conducted this experiment in his study chamber. So he called all the four old persons to his study chamber. Dr. Heidegger had a wonderful liquid which he thought could revive old persons and withered things to their youth and freshness. This liquid was the water from the fountain of youth. Dr. Heidegger had a beloved named Sylvia Ward. He was to marry her, but he could not. She had died on her bridal eve. This lady had presented Dr. Heidegger a rose. Dr. Heidegger had placed the rose among the leaves of a voluminous book. The rose later was withered and dried up. Dr. Heidegger expected the rose to revive freshness. So he threw the rose into the vase which had the water of the fountain of youth. The rose stirred, and a little time after, the leaves of the rose became green and its petals became crimson. The four guests, who were the friends of the doctor, were surprised to see this phenomenon. But they called it deception and some trick. The rose had become almost as fresh as Sylvia Ward had given to him about half a century ago. Dr. Heidegger wanted to observe the effect of the water of the fountain of youth upon the old persons who were his friends. The four guests upon whom the wonderful water was to be experimented thought it to be one of the eccentricities of the doctor. But the doctor insisted that the wonderful water would revive youth to old persons. He filled four champagne. He filled four champagne glasses with that wonderful liquid to be drunk by the four guests. But he asked them to make few general rules for their guidance before swallowing the drink. They would be virtuous and would act with wisdom when they became young under the effect of the wondrous water. The four guests then drank off the water and put their glasses on the table again. The wondrous water showed its effect, and soon there was cheerful glow on the faces of the four guests. Formerly, they appeared corpse like, but then there was rosy glow on their cheeks, and the time created wrinkles on their faces had disappeared. Widow Wycherley felt herself a young woman. Seeing the effect of the liquid, the guests demanded more of that water. Dr. Heidegger asked them to keep patience as he was observing the effect philosophically. The champagne glasses were again filled with the wonderful water. The guests took those glasses and immediately swallowed the liquid. It had a magical effect. Their whole body system was rejuvenated when the liquid was only passing through their throats. The guests also felt the magic power of that liquid. They felt the gush of young life shooting through their veins. They were in the happy prime of their youth. Their body and soul became vigorous. They felt like newly created beings in a newly created universe. Their youth, their vigorous youth then made them overexcited. They laughed loudly at their old-fashioned garments. All the guests were unruly in their behavior. They became wild. They behaved irresponsibly. They pretended to show themselves strange. One of them tried to imitate the high dignity of Dr. Heidegger. They shouted and leapt about the room. The widow Wycherley, with a mischievous merriment, went to the extent of asking Dr. Heidegger to dance with her. Dr. Heidegger resented to this unruly behavior of his guests. The girl widow Wycherley was almost inflamed to madness. She flirted, but neither she did grant to nor did she withhold her favors from the three guests. It made them to interchange threatening looks. They grappled fiercely at each other's throats. Then they lost their youth and got back their old age. Thus, Dr. Heidegger's experiment, though successful, ended woefully, or we can say, ended on a sad note. So, dear students, through this story, Nathaniel Hawthorne has successfully tried to exhibit or show or display the over ambition of human beings. Or we can say the tendency of human beings of possessing hope against hope means we aspire for, we expect, we desire for impossible. We human beings, we are very greedy by nature. We are very avaricious. We aspire for more and more. We aspire for what is not. As P.B. Shelley says, that we pine for what is not. We look before and after and pine for what is not in order to skylark. We look before and after and pine for what is not. Means we look here and there, we look into the past, we look into the present, we look into the future, and we desire for what is not. Means we desire for something that is not possible in this world. This is what this concept is very well expressed through this story, that never ever hope against the hope. Means anything that is impossible to happen in this world, that can never be achieved. And if you achieve, you should have your self control. It's a very humorous, very interesting story. That's all for today, and have a nice day. Thank you. God bless you.